Thank you so much, Mr. B, and good morning to everyone who has joined us today. As mentioned over the past few weeks, we've heard one message repeated over and over again that by 30 June, migrants and foreign nationals should somehow have left South Africa, an arbitrary deadline that has been set by groups who have taken it upon themselves to decide who belongs and who doesn't. But today, this really is an opportunity to be reminded that the loudest voices are not necessarily the majority voices. If there's one thing that has stood out, if there's one thing that has stood out in recent weeks is that South Africans from every corner of society have refused to allow fear and misinformation to go unchallenged. Instead of responding with slogans, they have responded with facts. And instead of fueling division, they have chosen to defend our democracy, our constitution, and our common humanity. One of the most encouraging developments has been the work done by researchers, universities, and civil society organizations to debunk some of the myths that have become so deeply entrenched in our public discourse. For example, we have been told that migrants are stealing jobs, yet research presented here shows that migrant entrepreneurship is often a net creator of employment. A World Bank study has even found that for every migrant employed, approximately 2 jobs are created for South Africans through business activity, supply chains, and local employment. We are constantly told that South Africa is being flooded by migrants, yet the data tells a different story. According to Statistics South Africa and the UN, migrants make up approximately 2.4 million people out of a population of 58.5 million, around 4.1% of the country's population. That figure includes both documented and undocumented migrants. We've also often been told that migrants are overwhelming our hospitals and clinics, but the evidence tells us that many documented migrants have medical aid and make use of private healthcare, while many undocumented migrants actively avoid public health facilities altogether because they fear arrest or deportation. Those who do access public health care pay the same means-tested fees as South African citizens, and in some instances, even more. Another narrative that has taken hold is the idea that people simply choose to remain undocumented, as though living without legal status is something preferable or advantageous. But that narrative asks us to ignore the reality of the systems we have built. Across South Africa, we know that documentation is not only a challenge for migrants. Many South Africans themselves have struggled to obtain identity documents, birth certificates, and other official records because of administrative backlogs, inaccessible home affairs services, historical exclusions, and systemic failures. For migrants and asylum seekers, these challenges are often more severe, with years-long delay in processing applications, repeated office closures, and significant barriers to regularizing their status. These facts matter, not because they suggest that South Africa doesn't have serious challenges, because we absolutely do. Crime, unemployment, poverty, and failing public services are real, and South Africans are justified in demanding solutions. But solutions begin with an honest diagnosis of the problem. If we misidentify the cause, we will never fix it. And this is precisely why the response from civil society has been so important. Across the country, organizations working on human rights, social justice, faith, healthcare, labor, and community development have come together with a remarkably united message: reject xenophobia, reject vigilantism, and reject violence. They have reminded us that frustration with the state can never be justification for targeting vulnerable people or taking the law into our own hands. But perhaps some of the most powerful responses has not come from institutions, but from ordinary communities themselves. Across South Africa, community leaders, residents associations, faith groups, and local organizations have reminded us that our neighborhoods have not been built on suspicion, but on everyday acts of kindness, respect, and coexistence. For years, South Africans and migrants have lived, worked, worshipped, traded, and raised families alongside one another. At a time when tensions are being deliberately heightened, these community voices are calling on all of us to remember our shared humanity. They remind us that every person, regardless of where they were born, deserves to be treated with dignity, and that each of us have a responsibility not to inflame fear, spread misinformation, or incite violence, but to protect the peace that exists within our community. Equally significant has been the response from government and from political leaders across the spectrum. Regardless of political differences, many have recognized that leadership requires more than echoing public frustration. It requires us to uphold the Constitution, enforce the law fairly, protect everyone who lives in this country from violence, and ensuring that migration and immigration is managed through legal institutions, not through intimidation, ultimatums, or mob justice. That is the responsibility of any democratic government. The question before us then is not whether South Africa has problems. We know it does. But the question is whether we will solve those problems by abandoning our constitutional values or by recommitting ourselves to them. The organizations and individuals here today have chosen the latter. We are sending a clear message that the voices calling for violence, exclusion, and fear do not speak for all South Africans. There is another South Africa, one that believes in dignity, accountability, the rule of law, and our shared future. And as we approach June 30, let us ensure that these voices are heard just as loudly. At the same time as reminding ourselves of our shared humanity, this action must be accompanied by practical action. For many years, organizations working alongside migrants and refugees have developed practical ways for ordinary South Africans to respond constructively to moments like these. They have encouraged communities to channel legitimate concerns through democratic processes by engaging ward councillors, municipality, and other public representatives, rather than allowing frustration to be exploited by those who promote vigilantism. They have also reminded us that each of us have a role to play in protecting our communities by documenting and reporting incidents of intimidation, hate speech, and violence. Platforms such as XenoWatch enable individuals to record xenophobic incidents, helping to ensure those who incite or perpetrate violence are held accountable, and that accurate information can inform responses by civil society and public institutions. These are our reminders that active citizenship is not only about speaking out against injustice, but it's also about knowing how to respond responsibly. That is the message that we have today, that active citizenship requires from all of us gathered here today a dignified, responsible, and actionable plan to ensure that even the most vulnerable of our society are treated with dignity and respect. Thank you so much.